All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Stephen King Rules, and this episode we are talking about 1983's The Dead Zone.
This, I think, is a fine adaptation. I reread the book before watching the movie, and I have not read this book in a long time. I don't know about you, but it has been maybe a decade since I've last picked this up.
Yeah, I read, there was a few Stephen King books that I reread at the beginning of COVID and
Mm,
and watched, and this was one of them. There were a bunch of like those obscure ones from the 80s that I hadn't seen before or that I hadn't remembered and stuff. And this was one of those ones that I remember like very early COVID hunkering down and reading this book. This book is has a little bit of a different feel than I'm used to for the Stephen King books. So like it was kind of a quick read, and then I remembered watching the movie, and I always remember thinking that too was like, yeah, this isn't a bad adaptation.
no, I did enjoy the movie. I think it has its differences from the book, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I feel like this is kind of a hard. I feel like any Stephen King work is kind of hard to adapt into a movie because his books aren't so much about what's happening to the characters as they are about the characters themselves. And I feel like this very much, The Dead Zone is about Johnny. And although there's all these things going on at the heart of the book, it's Johnny and his life and where he's at, not so much what's going on. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And really the book, or the movie I should say, kind of cuts out, not it's not even really the a chunk of the story. Really, it's only like what, a chapter maybe of the story. It's not really a lot of the story that's missing, but they do cut out origin story for Johnny when they cut out all of his childhood incidents, and then even they kind of hack away a lot of that first night that him and Sarah, not first night, that night that him and Sarah are out at the fair and stuff, because they don't mention anything at all with the that Wheel of Fortune at all. I don't think is in the that wasn't in the movie at all, was it?
No, I
So,
don't believe so.
but then yeah, like you had
Which
said too, I was trying to, as we were watching that, I was trying to even pick up on some of the stuff that they did change, and I don't know that really much of anything else they really did change.
I felt like was pretty accurate. I feel like anything like you said, like his upbringing and stuff like that wasn't necessarily make or break to the movie. I would say my main complaint with the movie, although I think Christopher Walken did a great job, I don't know if he would have been my casting choice.
Because he does sort of bring out a little bit of Christopher Walken in that role, even though it's very early Christopher Walken. There is still a few things where you're like, oh, I wonder if people were doing a Christopher Walken impersonation back in like '83, because there were parts of the movie where he's exactly the same as he is now, which is was kind of funny. With the Dead Zone, where I know we say this with some stuff a lot of times, and there's certain movies that are untouchable and that kind of stuff, but and even though we both said that this was a decent adaptation, this is one of the movies I do think that if there was a modern retelling of it, and they're like we've talked about other movies on here before, I think multiple times now that we've gotten done with it, and one of us has texted the other one and been like, oh, did you know that they made another version of this last year? And like, oh no, I never heard of that. But this is one that I would like. This is one that I think Mike Flanagan would be good at making, rather than remaking Carrie again for the umpteenth time. Like this would be a good one, like a modern telling of this one. And maybe the whole like limited series, like maybe this would be good over like 4 episodes or 6 episodes, where you could kind of, you could have had a whole episode where it's just the beginning where he gets knocked on the head, and then they have their date or whatever, and don't even have the accident or something in that first episode. But
Yeah. No, that
it was
is that's true. I feel like the movie in itself kind of feels it doesn't feel very fluid. I would say it kind of reminds me of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie where it feels like a couple of episodes compiled into a movie. I don't know if you also felt that way watching this. So I think you're right. I would agree with that this would be one that I wouldn't mind seeing a fresh take on. And I also wouldn't mind seeing someone playing Johnny who's a little closer to what I pictured like character-wise as far
yeah.
as I just felt like Christopher Walken did not have the right energy for this character.
Only real complaint about Christopher Walken was his exaggerated like limp skip thing that he kept doing in the movie. That was his, because like every time he would do that, all I kept thinking about was like a Bing Crosby or somebody like dancing in the rain or something, like jumping up and like clicking his heels together, because that's almost what it looked like the couple of times when he was doing it.
Is this one of the Stephen King books that you enjoyed? Do you like this book?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites though. But I also don't know that any of, I was trying to think of that earlier too, because a lot of these earlier books are kind of like what I was saying when I read the Dead Zone, or when I was talking about earlier when I read the Dead Zone at the beginning of COVID. Um, and I almost had this feeling of like, oh, this doesn't really feel like a Stephen King book, that I'm used to, because I'm so used to reading like the newer ones as they come out and stuff. One of the things that I was thinking about was in some of these earlier books was, oh yeah, it makes sense because he was like in his 20s, in his maybe in his 30s in some of these books. So it would totally make sense. And it also, like, if you look back at a lot of these books, like in the Dead Zone, um, Johnny was a teacher. He wasn't a writer.
Yep.
The same thing in The Shining. Now, Jack he was aspiring to be a writer, but he was also a teacher. Like, so that was that's one of the other things that I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, so in these older books, like not everybody's a writer like they are now. It's like that's what everybody is now. Everybody's a writer and stuff.
Yep.
But it makes sense because he was a teacher. I'm assuming he was probably a teacher when most of these ideas first started up in his head. So it makes sense that most of these guys were teachers and not writers and stuff at the time. So, but is this one of your go-to books for Stephen King?
No. And I don't know. I like to like kind of read and see what other people's opinions are um on the books and on the adaptions. I kind of as we go and as we get to them. And there are a lot of people who this is their favorite Stephen King book and they think that this is the best thing that he's written and they think that this is the best film that's ever been adapted of his work. And
See, because I would almost associate the Stephen or the Dead Zone with a Richard Bachman book. Like
yep.
if this would have a Richard Bachman name on it, I would buy that completely, because that's what that's what it feels like. It doesn't really feel like a straight up Stephen
No.
King story. It feels.
No, it's funny you say that because I
It's
was
more
gonna
fast
say that
paced.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting story, but it's not I don't know if it's a memorable one.
Because if you remember, one of the things that we talked about during the Cujo episode was the fact that Frank Dodd got brought up a couple of times, multiple times in the book. Gets brought up a bunch in the book. And when we talked about that, we both were kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know he's somebody from somewhere in Stephen King universe, but I can't remember where he's from. And then as soon as I started reading this one, I was like, oh, that's right. This is Frank
Yep.
Dodd. And then, but then, like, it gets to the part where Frank Dodd is, especially in the book. It seems like it happens earlier in the book than it does in the movie. But again, maybe that's because that doesn't make any sense. I was gonna say because maybe they cut stuff out of the book, but then it would be quicker. But anyway, he's mentioned a lot in Cujo.
Hmm.
Um, but when you're reading the Dead Zone, that's when I remembered, like, oh yeah, this is where Frank Dodd is from. And then in the book, especially of the Dead Zone, like it gets like whatever it is, like a third of the way through or whatever, and then Frank Dodd's done. Like, and then he's not mentioned
Yep.
at all for the rest of the thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that's probably why I didn't remember where he was from, because I'm pretty sure he's mentioned more in Cujo than he actually is mentioned in the Dead Zone. If I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but there's one part where I don't remember who it is, if it was Johnny or somebody else, but somebody's reading Carrie, the book Carrie.
Yes.
So, which I thought was funny. So Carrie, so this in this universe, Carrie doesn't exist, but somehow Frank Dodd exists in the same universe as Cujo, and Carrie exists in that universe. So it's like it is a weird like little plot hole that Stephen King created himself. But
He loves to do that. He loves to I feel like he's gotten better at it now.
there's a few things too that I noticed in this, um, that had other not connections necessarily, but other similarities that he doesn't really do so much anymore. But the other one was uh, Johnny's mom,
Hmm.
her like ultra uber religious, overbearing mother, uh, stereotype, or not stereotype, or whatever it is, that this is the multiple mother figures that Stephen King has in his stories that are that way, which makes me wonder what his mom was like, or maybe his grandmother, or maybe his aunt or something when he was a
Yeah.
kid.
He must have had
Uh,
some like ultra zealous religious nut in his vicinity
he
growing up
had to have,
because
because it's like it that it's not a character trait in all of his books, but there it's a lot, and it gets to a point too where like earlier in his books it's just like it's always like a mom or whatever, it's not like the straight out villain. But then as it gets to like later books and stuff, like in Dr. Sleep and stuff, like that's
yep.
then they're even like the bad guys are like these weird cult members and stuff, you know so it's expanded.
He doesn't be a
But
fan of organized religion, that's for sure.
and then the other thing too is, do you think that Johnny's powers in this book is just another form of TK that Stephen King was writing about?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that I don't know. I think so. I think that this is just another form of The Shining, you know. I would agree with you. Kind of going back to the Frank Dodd thing. I would say my biggest gripe would be I wish that Frank Dodd was a bigger piece to this story, and I wish that um, this story would have leaned into like the thriller aspect more. Um, I don't know. I do think the like Greg Stilson piece to this book, the like third act villain, is interesting, but I feel like it's not very thrilling.
Almost like you kind of get where it's coming from, but it's not as captivating as having like a real bad guy, kind of a like a bad guy's actually hurting people, kind of a thing. Yeah.
I wonder if this is the book where he kind of started to get the idea for like 11/22/63. Um, some semblance of like time and I don't know, killing
Oh yeah, like
presidents.
if you could go back and change stuff, would you?
And I mean, Greg Stilson is an interesting villain, and I do think that this kind of like the possibility of a tyrannical leader and the way almost, that kind of cult mentality of like bringing people in, and even though this guy is clearly off his rocker, there are still so many people who are rooting for him and voting for him. And like that alongside like his crazy religious mom is kind of an interesting dichotomy.
And I also don't know how, if you did remake or did a modern retelling of this story, how well the Greg Stilson character would go over in current modern times, because people would probably be like, well, that's not believable. I mean, he could have killed that baby, and people would be like, go Stilson, you're the man. Wouldn't be that far from the truth or modern reality. But
No, absolutely
no.
not. I will say the actor who plays Greg Stilson, I really liked that casting. I felt like that was a really good, he portrayed that role really well. But he wasn't as evil in the movie as he was in the book. There's like a snippet in him in the prologue of him like abusing that dog. And so you already kind of know, like before the book starts, that like this is someone to look out for. But it does, this story in general to me kind of feels like Stephen King threw a bunch of ideas in a baseball cap and then just like pulled a few out and was like, all right, the dead zone.
But this is also is what? This is our what, fifth episode, right?
Mhm.
Sixth episode, fifth. And so this movie was directed by David Cronenberg. So I guess I don't know how big of a deal that was at the time to be directed by David Cronenberg in 1983 or whatever. But and then next month we're going to be talking about Christine, which was directed by uh, John Carpenter, which is kind of cool. And then
Mm,
The Shining was
all
directed
that.
by Kubrick. So it is kind of cool that all these like early Stephen King stories were getting like some big name like horror actors. I mean, that's what I would assume Cronenberg was a big name back then.
It's so interesting to me, when you think about this time period that Stephen King was just kind of coming into the limelight, how a lot of those big names back then are like nothing anymore. And I don't want to say nothing as in
Mhm.
like they don't matter, but like they're not as popular. It's more like campy, if anything. And Stephen King is still 100% like dominating the horror field, like to this day. Every time I go on TikTok, there's people who are reading his work. I saw a girl the other day who was just starting the Dark Tower series, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, like I just discovered Stephen King," and I think that's so cool that like I don't know, he's just as, if not more, impactful now than he was in his prime.
For most of his books, like this one, I mean, it's not that it's dated necessarily. Um, Christine, which is the one we're talking about next month, that book feels dated for like that book is weird. Like it's probably part. I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but yeah, that book feels like it's almost from like the 50s or something. Like it's weird. Most of his stories, like even like The Shining and stuff, like you can still read that today, and there's nothing in that you're like, oh, what is that, or well, I don't even know what that is, or I wonder what they're talking about there. Like even though he does make, there's a lot of times even in like the dead zone and stuff, he'll make, I would assume, I don't can't think of anything that pops out, but usually makes references to like current events and stuff that are going on. It's is one of the big things with Stephen King is like he does like music and stuff, so he always is, they're always talking about, oh, this song is on the radio, or Bruce Springsteen was singing about this, or the Ramones were saying this, or whatever. He's usually got something like that in there. Yeah, they usually for the most part don't feel dated and stuff, which that's the problem with some of the older books. Like you go back and you're reading like, oh, this totally feels like it was written in 1984. Like just everything about it feels old. Like
Yeah.
if you read like some of like the Dean Koontz books and stuff, like you're just like, ugh, like
Mm.
it just, you know like just even like some of the like wording and stuff is just like, oh, this is how, like, oh, this book was written in the 70s, and this is how some men talked about women. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Like it's just like feels dated. But
Yeah, he does. Stephen King does have kind of a timeless quality about him. And I would say he, even the books that, were written in the 80s, that maybe they do feel like it is like one of the best examples that I can think of where it's just nostalgic, If it
yeah,
does feel a little older, it's like it feels intentional. It feels like something he could have written this year as like a glimpse back. But
well, and I think like sometimes when stuff especially with Stephen King, when stuff feels a certain way, I think a lot of times it's intentional. So there's like certain emotions and stuff you feel when you're reading it, or you feel like you're thinking a certain way and stuff. So which is which is cool, but it's a I guess it gets a certain point across. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was kind of keep up to speed with modern day stuff that's going on in the Stephen King world of adaptations. We already did our Carrie episode for the gosh, how old was that movie? That was like what 1976 or something, right? The first one. Um, but anyway, the
yeah, I think
Mike Flanagan's doing a limited series for Carrie for I don't even know who it is. It's Paramount or somebody or Netflix or and I don't know. I don't even remember who it is now. But anyway, they released a bunch of the first look photos this week and stuff. And there's there was a bunch of reactions online and stuff because a few of the photos from right away are like just showing some things that we talked about during the and we'll show a couple of the photos too on the screen. But some of the stuff that we talked about during our Carrie episode when we briefly touched on the 2013 remake and stuff, which was mainly just the fact that you can't cast like a halfway attractive person as Carrie and just have that be the opening like I mean the girl that they look like
yeah.
Carrie, she looks like a normal girl. And that's not what Carrie's supposed to look like. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but Carrie's a ugly duckling as described in the book. She's supposed to be, you know, you're not just a girl. You're like, oh, if you just did her hair a little bit and put her in some makeup and stuff, like she would be super cute. That's not what she's supposed to be like. And then the other thing is like the other scene that I noticed right away too was that they appear to show the shower scene, um, but it appears that Carrie is fully clothed in the shower scene. So it looks like they're changing that up as well. In my
Mm.
opinion, Carrie is wearing white pants in the photo that they have shown. So my thinking is they're probably just going to go that angle with the shower scene, so that way they don't have to show teenage girls nude. Which I guess I'm probably okay with that. I mean, you could show them in towels, and that would be okay. There's ways to do it tastefully. Yeah, this seems like another pointless remake. Even though we just said like in this talking about the Dead Zone that we both were like, yeah, they could remake this one. I would be okay with that. But Carrie, I think, is one of the ones that they got right the first time, and there's no reason to go
Yep.
back and make any changes
No.
to it. So
And, I know we had said when we did the Carrie episode, it would be interesting if they redid Carrie and they explored different aspects to the story. But I read like the synopsis as to what they're planning for this show, and it sounds like it's going to be like pretty much the main story of Carrie, but they're going to include more perspective from like the people around her, and then they're going to include like cyberbullying to like modernize it.
uh, so they're gonna wreck it. That's
And
cool.
so they're going to wreck it. And I don't know. It's one of those stories too where I mean bullying is very much still like prevalent today. But I feel like it's so much different. I don't know. I feel like culture has shifted so much from when the first Carrie movie came out to where that story stands on its own for its time, but like no one's throwing you know what I mean? I don't know.
Hmm.
I feel like it kind of cheapens it to modernize it. I think at that point, just tell a different story. Just feels like a money grab
Uh,
to attach Stephen King's name to it.
I agree. So we both think that the Dead Zone is an okay adaptation, but we'd both be okay if there was a modern retelling of it. Until they say that there's going to be a modern retelling of it, then we'll be like, the first one's
Then we're done.
fine, leave it alone. So
Hey, this
cool.
movie is also free on YouTube. So I would say it's worth the watch.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll talk to you next time.